I'll go ahead and get us started if that, or feel free.
Well, we can both say good morning.
Yeah, sure.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Kibros, and the commissioners for being with us today. I'm Linda Simmons, and I'm the board president, and I have a few remarks about TriMet's approved budget for fiscal year 2023. Over the last several years, TriMet has remained flexible, adapting to challenging, these microphones are really interesting.
Oh, sir.
Challenging financial landscapes, first brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic and now by worker shortage. As offices reopen and venues return to full status, we expect to see TriMet ridership to increase. Yet, we expect workforce changes with telework and hybrid of telework and in-person, keeping ridership lower than pre-pandemic levels for quite some years. With passenger revenue expected to be depressed for some time, one-time federal financial support packages waning and higher wages for response to worker shortages and retention, TriMet is taking a strategic approach to budgeting for the coming year. Despite this, the budget also supports capital projects that will bring faster, more reliable transit to the region, improve safety, further reduce our transit system's carbon footprint, and maintain a transit service that is accessible and welcoming to all. I'm going to now turn the meeting over to TriMet General Manager DeSue to give some additional detail and provide an update on projects and initiatives that the agency plans to move forward.
I wonder if we could just take a pause and make sure we get introductions
Sure.
for everyone. Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Harmony Kidos. I'll officially call to order the TriMet budget hearing. I'm the chair of the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to see everyone in person. This is my first in-person hearing, and first as chair, so bear with me. The TSCC is a community oversight commission established by the Oregon legislature. The commission oversees the budgets of all TSCC member taxing districts and annually conducts a thorough budget review and certification process. Additionally, the TSCC holds public budget hearings to engage with district leadership and provide additional opportunity for public comment before budget adoption. I'll start with my fellow commissioners to my right with introductions and to state if they have any business relationships with the district that could be perceived as a conflict of interest.
Good morning, all. My name is Mark Wibold, and I've been with the TSCC and in this, not this room, but with you all, 4 years now, I think. And I am a senior policy analyst at Portland State University in the president's office. And I have no business conflicts of interest with TriMet.
Good morning. I'm James Offsink, Vice Chair of the TSCC. This is my sixth year and seventh. Margo, help me out. Seventh. Thank you. Time hearing with all of you. Good to see you all. When I'm not TSCCing, I work at Oregon Health and Science University, and I don't have any business relationships with the district.
As I mentioned, my name is Harmony Kidos. This is my third year with TSCC. I was a former teacher. I currently work on K-12 science curriculum and assessment. I have two small children, not so small, I guess, 5 and 8, getting bigger by the day. And I have no conflict of interest with the district.
Good morning. I'm Margo Norton. This is also, trust me, I only have red lights on my back. This is my 7th year, second term. James and I are now starting the last half of our second term. In my prior life, I was a government finance officer. I worked with Nancy when I was the CFO of Metro, and I had no conflicts with the district.
Good morning. My name is Matt Donahue. This is my first term on TSCC and my first hearing, so it's great to be here. My day job is as a public finance banker and financial advisor for D.A. Davidson. I don't have any business relationships or conflicts with TriMet, and am a frequent rider of the 19 and 75 buses.
I'm Allegra Wilhite, Executive Director with the TSCC, and this is my first year with the TSCC as Executive Director, so very excited to be here for our first hearing. And I, too, make regular use of TriMet. I have an annual pass, so I'm very glad to be here and to speak with all of you today.
Good morning, I'm Toonie Betchart, and this is I'm starting my 18th year with TSCC. I've done 17 budgets with for TriMet. I enjoy this hearing. I always look forward to it being our very first, but I wanted to mention that Dee Brookshire and her team are just incredible. They have changed the budget, and like I said, I have done this every year that I've been with TSCC. I reviewed their budget, and what a difference the last 2 years have made. Last year especially, but this year too, the improvements are just incredible, making our job so much easier. And the other thing, Nancy and Allison are always so responsive to any questions we have to help us prepare the review. And our review will be posted on our website.
Great.
Thanks, Junie. I'll pass it back to you, Linda, for introductions of your staff and the board.
Okay, we'll start here to the left. Thomas?
Tom Skim here, board member representing Washington County. Good to be here.
Keith Edwards, representing District 5.
Lori Bauman, District 4, Southeast Portland.
And Linda Simmons, again, representing District 3. And this is my first year as board president, obviously.
Ozzy Gonzalez, I'm representing District 2, and we're in District 2, and that extends out towards, along the 26th, towards the west side.
Good morning. I am so sorry. Laverne Lewis, District 6.
And President Simmons, do you want me to go ahead and introduce staff, have staff go around? Good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Dessou. I've been here in the current job since June of last year. So thank you all for being here this morning. I'm the general manager. We'll start with you, Kim.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kim Sewell. I'm the Executive Director for Labor Relations and Human Resources.
Hi, I'm Dee Brookshire. I'm the Executive Director of Finance and Administrative Services, and the Chief Financial Officer for TriMet. And I just want to comment that we are so pleased to work with you. We've been saying over the last few days how many times we call you during the year, and we are so grateful for your guidance. Bonnie?
Good morning. I'm Bonnie Todd. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at TriMet.
Good morning. I'm Stephen Witter. I'm the Executive Director of Engineering, Construction, and Planning, and this will be my 6th TSCC hearing. So good to be here. I look forward to it too, Toonie.
Good morning. I'm J.C. Vanetta. I'm the Executive Director of Public Affairs for TriMet.
I don't know if it's working. Good morning, everybody. My name is Roland Hoskins. I'm the Executive Director of Maintenance Operations for TriMet.
Good morning. My name's Andrew Wilson. I'm the new Executive Director of Safety and Security at TriMet. So it's the first time on the call.
I've met him before.
Good morning. Ethan Dennisman, Executive Director of Information Technology, Information Officer for TriMet.
Would you like to introduce anyone else in the audience for our staff?
Absolutely. John, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Shelley as well.
Good morning. My name is John Gardner. I direct the Transit Equity, Inclusion, and Community Affairs.
Good morning. I'm Shelley Biden, General Counsel for TriMet, but I don't think I have any questions to answer today. So I didn't think I.
Also, Nancy, why don't you, Kim, and Young introduce yourselves as well. All right, President Simmons, you want me to go ahead and continue, or do you want to go back?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you all for being here this morning. Good morning, Chair Quiros, and also all of the commissioners. So this is my first TSCC as the general manager, but it would be my second with being here at the corporation. I would also like to acknowledge Allegra Wilhite, the new executive director, and welcome her. It's good to see you also, and thank you for introducing yourself to me this morning. Before I begin, I want to take a quick moment to recognize the employees at TriMet and on every single level here who continue to advance the organization each and every day. Through all we've been through over the past 2 years, this organization has shown its resilience, its grit, and its grind in the face of adversity. I'm very proud to be here as the general manager of this great organization and really proud of all what we have done and all what's still to come. So let me give you an overview of the budget here for a moment. TriMet's approved fiscal year 2023 budget of $1.8 billion includes the following: $736.7 million in day-to-day operating requirements, $246.1 million in capital improvement. The remainder of the budget includes debt service, pass-through funds, the TriMet provides to other governmental agencies, fund balances, and contingencies. For the 10th straight year, the budget does not include an increase to our base fare. Let me share with you the opportunities and the challenges that guided our budgeting process this year. TriMet continues to provide essential transit services to the Tri-County area and also the region as we recover from the pandemic. We're working to restore ridership and address the greatest operator shortage in TriMet history. We continue to enhance customer and employee safety despite the national law enforcement and security resource shortage that appears. As TriMet is an important part of the solution to address climate change, we've reduced the agency's greenhouse gas emissions by some 63% in the past year. And we are further developing a long-term carbon reduction strategy that would move TriMet to be net zero by 2050. We are providing more access to transit for those in our communities who are struggling financially. More than 40,000 people have now signed up for our reduced fare program based on their income level. And we're looking at opportunities to use state funding to help more people connect with jobs, education, and services. TriMet is in an intensive capital project period during which we will complete the renovation of one of our major bus operating facilities, and that's the Powell Garage. We are completing construction on Division Transit Project. This will lead to the launch of our first TriMet FX, or Frequent Express line, in September. It will move people more efficiently and reliably along the Division Street corridor between Gresham and downtown Portland. Work continues on a Better Red, our project to expand MAX Red Line service into Hillsborough and address the bottlenecks that will increase reliability throughout the light rail system. TriMet is also implementing key state of good repair work on critical infrastructure and on bus and rail fleet replacements and expansions. At TriMet, we are committed to serving our region, supporting our customers and our employees, being good financial stewards of taxpayer funds. Just thank you for your time this morning with us. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Executive Director of Finance, Dee Brookshire, to provide additional comments to the questions that you've submitted.
Okay. Well, I wanted to let you know that we are very happy to see you again. We always enjoy meeting with you and look forward to going through these questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chair Quiros.
Thank you. Before we dive into questions, we do want to acknowledge the district's receipt of the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association for its fiscal year 2021-2022 adopted budget book. We would also like to congratulate the district on the continued improvements to the budget document, as Toonie shared with us earlier. We appreciate the commitment to improving transparency and readability of the document, not just for us and our staff, but for the public at large. So we'll begin we'll dive into our questions, and once we finish, there will be an opportunity to take public testimony, and participants may be asked to be recognized at that time. So I think we should dive in, and I have the first question. General Manager DeSue and COO Todd, congratulations on starting your new positions last year. What has been your biggest aha moment here at TriMet this first year in your roles? And what is the most important thing upcoming in this budget?
I'll start off before pitching over to you, Bonnie, here. I'll start it here. I would say the great resignation, as they're calling it here. You know, if you think about COVID and how it set this unprecedented churn in the United States and the labor, in the whole labor market across the U.S., it was widespread job losses that occurred during the pandemic. And it really affected us last year at TriMet. We lost close to 300 represented employees last year and more than 120 non-represented employees. And it was a whole myriad of reasons across the board that occurred there. And we have actually started to look at a way on how to address some of the issues that we were dealing with. We're looking at improving our safety overall for personnel and really focusing on the employee experience as an organization. We're looking at improving our relationships with the ATU that's taken place there, and really focusing on the recruitment and the retention of personnel. Don't know if you've seen latest here, and this is something that's systematic across the country right now. I was just in Denver 2 weeks ago at a CEO conference for all transit leaders across the country. This is the number one issue that all agencies are faced with, is trying to get personnel to come. Our latest is we had to compress our wage rate to move our start rate up to $25 an hour in order to get people to come. And if you're here with us this morning, you're hearing one of our resolutions. We had to reduce service by 10% because we just didn't have staff to be able to provide that. So I think that one aha for me is the great resignation, and we're doing everything we can to stop it or at least mitigate it.
Thank you. So I've been here for just under 4 months. I've had a number of aha moments. I would say the two that I'm most focused on at the moment are related to security, and the aha about that is that law enforcement ranks are not going to increase or improve substantially anytime soon. So the aha is I am now tasked with figuring out how to add security to the system and you know, just improve the atmosphere out there without those resources. So that's really a place where we're trying to be very creative, and we're starting to make some strides. Very pleased with that. The other area is in maintenance. I think I was a little surprised at the age of the system. I mean, I know how old the system is, but the age of the assets and some of the systems. And, you know, obviously we've been a capital organization for a long time. We're pivoting to more of an operating focused organization. And so what I look forward to in the next year is looking to the future to see what we can do to update many of our systems.
Thank you so much. GM DeSue, in your opening comments or your first response, you talked a lot about labor challenges, and so our next question digs into that a little bit more deeply. We're aware, as you mentioned, that TriMet has struggled to both recruit and retain, especially drivers over the last year, and you mentioned the impact on service reductions as well. We know that we saw in the budget that there's an incentive package to assist with recruitment, and you talked about increasing the starting wage as well. We wondered if you could tell us kind of about how effective the $3,500 recruitment bonus and the higher starting wage have been, and then wanted to just hear what other strategies you've been using on the recruitment piece aside from the initial kind of aside from recruitment, the retention piece, you know, getting people in the door, but then how do you keep people here as well?
So I'll start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kim Sewell, our Executive Director of Human Resources. This was a very clear focus of mine, is to create a single point executive steering committee to take a look at this. And Kim was one of the points, along with Rochelle Glacier, who's not here today, in our transportation committee. But this is very critical to us, and I'll turn it over to you, Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Dessou. Morning again. Obviously, this has been a significant focus for Human Resources and Labor Relations. And as Mr. Dessou mentioned, we do have an operator shortage committee that meets regularly, and it's identifying actions that we will be taking to try to mitigate this great resignation impact that we are seeing. The incentive program that we did launch has been effective. We did see an immediate spike with our applications. It was very promising, but then they leveled off. And so what we did is we recently increased those incentives. So our signing bonus is, as you might have seen, we've been advertising, but our signing bonus is now at $7,500.
Wow.
And our internal referral program is at $1,500. Again, we saw an immediate spike in application numbers, more promising than we've seen. Actually, my recruiting manager indicated it's the highest number he's seen since he has been doing operator recruitment at TriMet for years. So that has been a very significant boost to our application numbers. Some of the additional actions that we are taking are, we use the Indeed online hiring platform. We've expanded our profile for that. That has allowed direct apply to occur, and we've also utilized their resume tool, which allows us to reach out directly to applicants. We have increased our capacity for conducting interviews. We've got additional staff that can review resumes and help participate in the interview process. And we've got a new email campaign that we've launched where we're reaching out to some of the old applicants that we've had. We have a network of about 7,000 prior applicants that we've reached out to try to increase some application. We've also streamlined our hiring process so that we've shortened it as much as possible. It takes a while. We've got significant security and background checks, but we've streamlined that so we can get people in and successfully in the process as soon as possible. And there are a lot of job fair hiring events that my staff is attending, both virtual and in person. And I think we've got one hopefully set up towards the end of May. So all of those efforts, and again, with our operator shortage committee, we are regularly bringing ideas to the group to vet.
Thank you. I have two follow-up questions. The first one, on the recruitment side, could you remind me or help me understand how long does it typically take from the application point until you would have somebody who's able to be a driver, whatever the first position would be?
It takes a few weeks to actually get an offer. We
Okay.
can issue a conditional offer, but then there are security checks and drug screenings that have to occur. So it takes a couple of weeks for that. And then the applicants come in and start our training program. And I believe now that is 6 or 7 weeks.
Okay.
So 7 weeks. And so that's, at that point, then they're able to sit in a seat and operate the bus.
Yeah, so it is a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 weeks or something between applicant to being able to have somebody fully hired. Thanks. And then on the retention piece, I think and probably because the way our question was worded, it was focused a lot on the recruitment part, but could you touch on some of the things that you're doing on the retention piece as well?
We are serving our employees to look at retention issues, number one, to see what in fact would keep them here at TriMet. And then as General Manager Dessou and Bonnie Todd mentioned, safety and security is a primary focus of our operators and the rest of our staff. And so there is a steering committee that is addressing a lot of those issues to make sure that we are meeting their needs and making them feel safe when they are on the system, which we think is one of the main reasons that individuals may not be staying with TriMet. So that, in addition to some other incentives that we're looking at, are things that we are trying to do to keep, not just bring people here, but keep them here as well.
Can I add also to that? I think one of the things that a lot of organizations across the country are faced with right now is the mental health and well-being of our employees. After these 2 years, it's just been unprecedented. And we've brought in people from various different medical and health facilities to start educating our employees how to take care of themselves through this pandemic and really focusing on the health that they've been dealing with. And, you know, Portland has been a city that's been in the national spotlight, and that has kind of trickled down to our employees. And we've had a rash of employees that left us because of the environment that's going on and what they're facing with. So we're working with all of the stakeholders in the region, our elected leaders, and also all of our businesses to help rectify that and move forward.
I'll add too that we routinely meet with the ATU officers in the labor group, and that has been the focus of the last couple of meetings, right, is eliciting from them some ideas on retention and what we could do to improve the environment for our frontline staff.
Thank you.
Just a brief follow-up. Could you comment, I understand that the incentives in your activities have increased your applicant pool and plateau and increase in plateau, but what about the quality of the applicants? Are these, a big
that's
pool
a great
doesn't
question.
mean a quality
yes.
pool?
So great question, and it has done both. So obviously the pool of applications has increased, but the number of successful offers has increased as well.
Great.
And our class sizes, those have increased, they're stepping up and up, they're regularly increasing. So it's been very positive.
Thank you.
I have the next question. We're going to switch gears here a little and move to ridership. So last year we asked about ridership trends, and TriMet's financial modeling expected ridership to return to pre-pandemic levels around 2025. TriMet initiated several priority projects to address ridership, including website updates, improved communications, and customer service training. What is the ultimate goal of all of these efforts, and have you found that these projects are being successful so far? And what other approaches are you planning for the future?
Thank you for that question. I will begin by talking about the financial modeling, and I will then turn it over to JC to continue to talk about ridership. Our financial modeling, frankly, now suggests that ridership is not going to return to pre-pandemic levels until later in the decade, like the 2028, 2029. And the reason for this is twofold. We recognize that because of the, well, who knows why, but a number of businesses have moved out of the core, and there are a number of reasons for that, and they've taken our riders with them. Another reason is because of remote working. So many people and companies have come to realize that remote working is something that's going to be here to stay. So that's reduced our ridership as well. And so that's why we're projecting that both the ridership and the fair revenue likely that comes with them is going to be a little later in coming, and we're working on that. But we're monitoring these trends. We're monitoring very closely. We're adjusting our ridership projections as well as our fair revenue projections constantly. So whether they're, for riders, whether they're returning or new, the ultimate goal, of course, is to increase ridership. To do that equitably and efficiently is our goal. Once we solve the operator shortage situation, we'll be able to improve our service reliability. Right now, we've had to extend headways on some routes, which of course then makes it a little slower and a little less reliable for our customers. It's another reason that they resort to other modes of transportation. So we believe we will lead so many of our efforts we are working on, such as the security presence, improving the security presence on the system, and stepping up on our cleaning, and working on our destination-less riders that are prevalent. So we do expect to improve customer service, the customer service experience for our riders. And I'll turn it over to J.C. Vanetta, our Executive Director of Public Affairs, to talk more about ridership and how effective these efforts have been.
Yeah, thank you, Dee. A lot of our marketing throughout the pandemic has been focused on keeping people safe, letting them understand about mask usage, washing your hands, all those things. And so our marketing efforts have been focused on that as we've been coming out of the pandemic, because we've been working on our cleanliness, our security presence, And while we're doing that, and our reliability, Dee made mention of that, we don't feel necessarily confident to go out and market our service just yet. We want a good customer experience for folks. However, we have been focusing our marketing efforts and sales efforts on those employers who are bringing people back. We saw the federal government bringing 7,000 people back to the downtown core, Multnomah County, the city of Portland, even TriMet. And so we've been really working with a lot of those employers to help educate all of those folks who are returning to the system, and that's been actually a lot of fun. We've also been doing some marketing around destinations. People, I don't know if you are much like me, but I want to get out of the house, and so how do we get people out of the house and encourage people to use the system again? So there's some light touches that we have been doing with our marketing efforts. There are still more underway. Once we feel comfortable as an agency to throw open the doors and welcome people back, we definitely want to do so. I would also just note that one of the things that we have underway, what we call internally, is a comprehensive service analysis, and what we call publicly Forward Together. And it's an effort that we have hired Jarrett Walker, who is a local person who does a lot of work in studying service and service patterns, all of that stuff, to help us understand our service and what it should be moving forward. We know that the demographics have changed. We know that people have moved during the pandemic. We know that people are teleworking. And so it's really doing a lot of research to understand people's travel patterns. Travel patterns have changed as well. So it's taking all of that information and laying it out and understanding our service levels, where we need to serve more people, the equity of it all, and really putting together and forth a plan for us to begin working toward. Later this year, we'll have 3 scenarios that we'll be going out to the public with. We've been doing a lot of outreach right now, but we'll be going out with 3 scenarios later this year. We'll be choosing one and adopting it, and it'll be our plan forward that we begin working toward building out our service and revamping our service so that we can accommodate and provide that high quality service that people in our region expect. So those are some of the efforts underway. I would also note that we have a ridership recovery task force internally that we've been meeting monthly, and to go over a lot of the things that Dee has made mention of, safety, security, cleanliness, our marketing efforts, and even just kind of that pulse of what's going on, people returning to work. So it's been very informative, but we have a lot of work to do. So
I've got a follow-up question to this. Destination-less riders. That sounds like a euphemism for homeless folks that are using your services to shelter. Does that seem right? And how? Gosh, that seems like if that is true, a unique situation for a driver. I mean, they're put in a position where it's almost like our libraries, where the folks there have to become social workers, you know? And I'm just curious if that's is one of the challenges that you're finding with this new, the new world of transportation.
I'll start off and then I'll pitch over to you, Andrew, because I know you're dealing with it directly. Last year, we had quite a few of our houseless customers that was on the system, and they were riding the system back and forth for shelter. And we started reaching out from an outreach standpoint and working with other businesses to help us to provide opportunity to them for shelter and also opportunity for additional programs. We've partnered with the Multnomah County Sheriff Department currently now, and I would like Andrew to kind of talk about the program and kind of what we're doing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Can everybody hear me all right? Is it? There we go. All right, thanks. Yeah, no, this is an excellent question and something that we're all faced with. And I would just say that echo kind of, we have a resilient and extraordinary bunch of frontline employees that really are shouldering a big burden right now in this space. One of the things that we've been really proud of to accomplish over this last year is a much better partnership and relationship with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department, but also the Multnomah County Behavioral Health Department as well, which kind of came along with that relationship. And so we have a couple different folks that we're working with to develop better models in terms of how to do to sort of open TriMet up for outreach activity that could take place with Multnomah County to support some of the most vulnerable folks that are out there in our system. We also have, which I think is a question that's coming up, but a safety response team here at TriMet that we've created, which is really designed to really reach out to folks and connect them with services. And that's part of our reimagining public safety process that we went in over the last couple of years, which actually is led so aptly by Dr. Lewis. And that was an outcome of that group. But this is a front and center problem for TriMet right now. And you know, how we approach it is going to be different than we may have approached it in the past. I think some of the tools that we have now are better than we've ever had before in terms of actually reaching good outcomes for some of the folks that use our system. And I'd not say that it's a entire houseless camp in the sense that there are only certain times usually where we see a large spike in writing, but a lot of that is occurring with weather too, when it's cold and wet outside. So I think people understand the humanity issue that we're faced with. But it does put our frontline operators in just a really difficult circumstance. And so we're working with the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department and Multnomah County Behavioral Health to develop models that do service outreach on our system, connect people back to opportunities that are in the area, because there are a significant amount of agencies that work with some of these folks, but a lot of people have become completely disconnected from some of those. We see those folks and we interact with them. Our operators interact with them. Our safety response team interacts with them. Our security personnel, our transit policing force interacts. So we can help identify who those folks are, and it's about connecting them back to the area resources in an effective way and not just, throwing them off the system, essentially. So that's where we're focused right now.
Thank you. I also have the next question, and it has exactly to do with what we were just talking about. Safety and response, security, and so TriMet has handed over transit policing to Multnomah County and created a non-armed safety response team. I'm fascinated by that because I'm at PSU. We're also patrolling unarmed, and it's a new world for our safety and security people. We're learning a lot. And has this transfer of duties enabled TriMet to increase the number of safety response team members that have been on buses and trains? And what has been your experience with the new model so far? How are you measuring success for this model moving forward?
Yeah. I'll take that one too. Yeah, we're really proud of our safety response team. We have 24 dedicated team members at this time. It started in September of last year, and they serve customers and riders from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Out on the system. We measure their performance related to contacts and service outreach referrals. They are contacting, as of last month, between sort of 2,500 and 3,000 different contacts were established last month, and that number has increased steadily since September. Part of that is because we've actually had to staff up and train those folks. There's a significant amount of training that goes into becoming a safety response team member. But we measure the success in those contacts and outreach, but we also measure it in ridership system presence type numbers. People really like to see folks out there on the system engaging and present from a TriMet staff perspective. And these folks have an ability, they have a wide range of experience. We have folks that have master's degrees in counseling. We have people with lived experience. We have just a really extraordinary team of individuals that are doing this work out there right now. And we feel like it's pretty innovative. We've shared it with other transit properties across the country who are also dealing with very similar issues in this space. And so this team has helped us to establish more presence and connect with folks, as we were talking about earlier. I'll say that this is coming at the same time that we are down in our ability to get transit police on the system, and it's difficult to hire security personnel, just like it's difficult to hire operators. So there's a shortage there as well. And so this is allowing us to establish more presence and activity on the system at the same time, which is a secondary benefit. But I think the timing is very good on this program. It matches a lot of similar programs like PSU and the City of Portland with their street response teams and everything else. I think we're approaching things differently together in this community, and an unarmed security force, which is more focused on kind of root cause issues and discussions with folks and providing the right level of support with those folks, I think is the right approach, and that's the direction we're headed.
Just to follow up, street response in Portland, we just had the pilot. Hopefully that'll expand. Are you coordinating with them?
We are. We have some kind of discussions that are happening with those folks. We also have discussed, and these are, we just created our program in September, so some of this is in its infancy, but we've talked about how we can, even open up our space to some of their activity and cross-train and those types of things. A lot of the activity that we are dealing with and approaching solutions to, I mean, it's a community-wide issue, and everybody's at the table trying to solve these issues. You know, we operate a transit system through an area that's struggling right now, and so we want to try to reach out to local partners and external partners and help us do our mission and have us help our community. So it's a natural thing that we end up interacting a lot with other activity directed at the same root cause. So,
thank you.
I have a follow-up on this. Thanks for your introduction to the program, and really exciting to learn about the new steps that TriMet is taking. With a lot of different, and I hesitate to call it, law enforcement, but with a lot of different security measures, I think that over the last few years especially, people have become more cognizant of implicit bias and of differing demographics and different outcomes based on demographics of people interacted with. And I wondered if, those are metrics that you're paying attention to, and how you're kind of making sure that the equity goals for the organization are met with an increase or changing landscape of security.
Yeah, and I think a large part of this, we've really taken advantage of our Reimagine process to kind of help understand what the needs of our community are. We have community members at the table, which again, Dr. Lewis leads a discussion alongside myself and others, just to kind of continue to hear from the community. I think that, when you think about the safety response team, that's a very different way of approaching public safety at TriMet in and of itself. And it kind of represents some of that I mentioned earlier, but that kind of reimagining process of how we can actually establish better outcomes for particularly the most vulnerable, ridership and most diverse populations. The safety response team is very reflective of the community that they serve. And they're also, their job is not to do code enforcement per se, so they don't even go into those realms. Their job is really to lend a hand and to be available and establish presence. If they identify something that's unsafe, because safety is paramount here at TriMet, they will communicate that and call that in, which I think the community wants. But they're not out there to do any code enforcement. And once you get into the code enforcement space, this is where you really need to spend some time on how you're doing that to make sure it's equitable. And I say that because we do that activity, and it's necessary activity at TriMet, but that in and of itself we've taken a lot of trainings related to that over the last couple of years and established a tremendous amount of work along those lines to really make sure that we're approaching that in the right way for our community. But we're really proud of the safety response team because it does represent that kind of different path in terms of how to engage folks in a very non-threatening way.
I would just add to that too that the program within the LRHR department that deals with training has introduced an implicit bias class that we are having all of our internal employees attend, including the frontline staff.
I'm going to try to wrap up this line of questioning, and I'm actually interested perhaps in hearing from some of the board members about how they are approaching this. But I mean, this is a perfect storm. I mean, you're dealing with staff recovery, with ridership recovery, with safety concerns, real, perceived, socially related or not. I mean, in any year, just one of those would be a challenge. And now all three of them are here. how, I mean, and one lever works the other. I mean, if there isn't reliable service and frequent service, you're not gonna get riders back. If you get riders back, but the safety issues are threatening, it's not gonna last. How do you balance these levers? What's your priority? How are you gonna judge what's working? As you focus your resources, how are you gonna know what's working? What's your best return? How to keep these levers in balance? I mean, that's your job as the governing board, right?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I think that this board has been approaching it in a way of dignity and respect, not only toward the public, but also toward the employees as well, to make sure that everyone is safe and respected in their everyday living and dealing with TriMet. And that's the key, I think, to all of it. When we see the complaints that are going down, and when we see that people are not being treated in a disrespectful way, I think that's the key to it. You know, we want to keep the employees safe, but we want to make sure the public is kept safe as well. And I think when we approach it in that manner, I think that makes a huge difference, because we're not a police force. We're not an agency that deals with mental health or drug abuse, but we want to make sure that people are treated with respect, and we try to make sure that we refer them to those, we use those resources that are available to us so that people can get their help that's needed in those particular situations.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If I may add, Tom Skim here. As you've noted, it's an unprecedented time here, and I think first and foremost, the most important key part for us has been working with Sam and the rest of the staff so that those 3 or 4 key issues that have come up in the past 2 years are on the forefront of all of our minds as we're discussing any and all policies and resolutions. So the economics related to ridership, as well as the employee issues, retention, hiring issues that we've discussed thus far. I'm so pleased to know that all of our staff, everyone here, as well as those who are not present in this room, are thinking about this, and as we're making any and every decision. So I think that's been the key for us so far. And knowing that we're in sync as the board and GM and the rest of the staff, so that we all know that there might not be the correct, the 100% answer, but there's no wrong answer when all of our hearts are aligned and taking steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. A great question, Commissioner Norton. I simply wanted to acknowledge that it is indeed a perfect storm, but the way I see it, it's the most human storm. We don't have the luxury of isolating one of these issues from another. We don't get to expand the service while ignoring climate change. We don't get to address the worker shortage problem without addressing the humanity that our drivers deserve. We don't get to address the ridership issue with customers without addressing cleanliness and safety on the bus. And I would argue we'd never really had the luxury of isolating these issues, but we now are in a moment where we all see the matter. We all see a system that needs to be brought back. The riders see it, the public sees it, employers see it, and at least we all know that we don't get to ignore this matter. Something's got to give, and we are having to address this issue in a way that I think brings out the best in us, forces us to get out of our silos, and what I appreciate about this moment in time is that I don't think anybody out there is arguing anymore that we have to go back to the way we used to do things because that's what's going to work. At the very least, we're at that level of clarity. And yes, a lot of things got to get reimagined. And I'm scared and excited, frankly, at us stepping forward into this challenge. I don't see us having much of a choice, but luckily, the bones of our system, the bones of our infrastructure, and the region that we're serving are still there. And we still have many reasons to get outside and move around. So we're trying to figure out how to match that. I really appreciate the question, but I think it's at the nexus of what we're trying to do together.
Thank you.
I want to acknowledge that the federal government has put a great deal of resources into transit all over the country. That's been a great commitment from the federal government, and that has helped us to maintain service given the personnel shortages. We've been able to keep buses and trains operating, at least in part because of those funds, and that's enabled us to continue to focus on essential workers who really have depended on transit service all through the pandemic. So I want to acknowledge that piece of it. That's been an important kind of tool for us to keep operating. I think that rebuilding ridership is extremely important because that will help with safety. When you have enough people on the bus and on the train, it just is safer. And in fact, the New York Times yesterday, I think, had a front page article on this very subject. And so to me, all three of these issues are very important, but that's has some primacy to me.
Thanks.
I'll add to what everyone has said in that I think it is, regardless of the pandemic, I think it was time for the agency to look at a comprehensive service review. The area has changed. There are some transit deserts within our region, and increasingly we have to look at the travel patterns of individuals. And so one key ingredient in increasing ridership is making sure that we're taking them where they want to go. And I can assure you that the board is aligned with staff, with the general manager, in looking at all possible ways to look at the way we serve particularly our bus service, not to discontinue ones that are serving the public well, but potentially to reallocate some of the service to areas where people are now migrating to.
Thank you. I think we'll move along now, if you will. Had your chance to weigh in. All right, different topic. I have always thought that particularly non-users of the transit system think that Farebox is what runs your system. But those of us in this room know that the employer payroll tax is the big driver of your operational revenues. So, and we also know that you have had since 2016, an automatic increase in the tax rate that's scheduled to last till 2025, I think, 26. So the question is, I noticed that I think it was Mr. Veneto who was saying about the employers that are back in town, but it was the feds, the city, TriMet, the county, the governmental employers. So the question is, how are your employers feeling about the tax, particularly since the idea of the tax or the selling point was it's how your employees get to work? Well, they're working from home. It's how your customers get to your business. Well, they're getting their stuff delivered or ordering online. Are you getting any pressure from the employer community about the tax rate?
Let me start first, JC, and then we'll kind of navigate the UND for a moment. We sit on several committees in the city of Portland. The Business Alliance is one of the boards that we participate with. And we've heard from some of our stakeholders about putting more service out on the street. You're getting more funding, you should put more service out. And we've talked to them about the problems that we are experiencing with the recruitment and the retention portion of it. One of our priorities as we move forward into FY23 is our community partnership relationships. And that's an area that we're focusing here at TriMet, is to build and strengthen those relationships and really to go and tell our story. I think that that's an area that we've got to really focus on, is really telling what TriMet is about, what our purpose and how we can help the region. Because me as a general manager, I get up every single day with the focus in mind. It's about people. It's about getting people to opportunities, to be able to take them to medical and health and housing, and also educations and getting people to jobs. So we've got to continue to tell that story there. But we've had a very few people that come forward to talk with us about the employer tax, but we're working with them to really tell that story there.
I'll take it, yeah. And also, just to continue on the financial side, aside from what General Manager Dessou has indicated, the employers have not been coming forward in mass numbers to question or to ask us to roll back the payroll tax or to even stop it. As you may recall, we actually have to report every year on how we're using that fund and whether we still need it or not. And they're very understanding about the fact that it does cost a great deal of money to run this system. They're very pro-transit, both for the environment and also because it's a great help to their employees. And while a great number of them are working remotely, many are experiencing hybrid situations where some are working remotely, some are not, some are coming in more times than others. But we are working with them. We worked on our institutional program this last year and the year before that during the pandemic to reduce the cost of that for the employers to reflect the changes in ridership and the reduction in ridership by their employees. We've dramatically modified the programs, but unfortunately our cost of service remains high. So every bit of the money is needed to keep us going. So now I'll turn it over to JC if he has any other comments.
Yeah, I'd just like to tack on to what Dee and Sam have already said. We have stayed in close contact with all of our employers throughout the pandemic, as Dee had said, really working with them to reduce potentially some of their cost of transit, because some of them were still needing it to move essential workers to and from home and to the jobs. So, and through a number of surveys too throughout the pandemic, just to get a pulse of what they were thinking and feeling. And so we've stayed close. I would also note, and I would just acknowledge Tom Mills, who's out in the audience. He's managing our comprehensive service analysis. And with it, as you know, some companies have relocated to the suburbs, or they're kind of rethinking about how they're bringing people back. Really, how can we take our analysis and their movements with the employers and the employees and the movements, how do we then put that into our plan moving forward? And so Tom and his team are really doing a lot of outreach with the counties, with employers, to understand those origin and destination so that we can program that into our next service plan. So we've not heard that chatter, but we have also been staying in close contact with them. So.
Great, thank you. I have the next question, shifting gears a little bit. Obviously, the pandemic has brought us unprecedented levels of change and disruption, but it's also brought unprecedented levels of funds from our state and federal partners and governments. And we talked about this last year and how that's provided relief, but and we know many districts are receiving those funds again this year, or money's being carried over. Barring unforeseen circumstances, fingers crossed, that we are actually coming out of this, that spigot is closing. So we're interested, with that additional money and funds, what programs or services began with that pandemic money are you continuing or planning to continue into the future? And how will those be funded, given the fact that those dollars are changing or drying up?
Good point. Good questions. So this year, the agencies primarily, ever since the pandemic funding began, we've been primarily spending it on what the funding requires, which is directly on increased cleanliness of the system, safety, protection of riders and employees. But the funds continue to support our operations. We haven't laid anyone off. We haven't had to significantly cut service. We have had to cut service some. But this money is what's keeping this agency going, in operationally. And as our ridership returns, and we didn't mention it earlier, but it has been about a 25% return since the beginning of the pandemic. So we're hopeful that it's currently plateauing, but we expect it to continue to rise soon, as soon as the confidence in the system returns, and we have measures in place for that. But since we've been able to run it, keep everything running and not cut things, the question comes, okay, what happens when the money stops? Well, we have learned how to tighten our belts. We have learned how to run the system on less money. And we do expect, with the strength of our payroll taxes, we will be able to return, we'll be able to continue operations as far as we can, up towards the end of this decade, for sure. It's given us a new way to look at things, too, the pandemic itself, remote working, cleanliness of the vehicles, platforms, and evaluation of the service itself, as you've heard. We're working on all of this to make it as cost-effective as possible so that we can continue operations as usual, as normal.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Margaret. Ms. Brookshire, if I could ask you a little bit more. The budget message and a number of places in the document talk about the fact that you're carrying more forward in unrestricted fund balance because you've been able to use the federal monies to kind of allow you to do that. But you always refer to using it to fund shortfalls in near-term future years. You just said to the end of the decade. I just wanted to understand. I did not take near-term shortfalls to be going to the end of the decade.
Well, they taper out as we move out. We have unexpected expenses occurring now, such as the ones you've heard of earlier about the larger cost towards retaining and recruiting. And so we are expecting it to move forward. Near term, we're looking at the fiscal year 23 budget. And so near term at 23 is you're now into 26, 27. That's how we're looking at it. So we do expect that will be we'll be making we'll be taking a closer look at how we are operating the agency towards the end of this decade. So maybe the end of the decade is the wrong term. Maybe in the late near future.
Well, it sounds as if your personnel costs, because not just of the incentives and the retention benefits, but the base pay is also rising to meet the market conditions, that you're going to be carrying a heavier load, and that if ridership doesn't respond, and I think you said instead of 25, I think you said now it would be 28, 29 before ridership recovers.
That's what our very conservative financial forecast model
It sounds like
indicates.
that unrestricted balance is going to have a lot of calls on it.
Completely right. Absolutely correct.
All right. Thank you.
Our next question is also about federal funding, but is about federal funding looking forward instead of looking back. So we know that TriMet has received a significant share of transportation money from the federal infrastructure bill that President Biden signed in November 21. We're wondering how much money TriMet will be receiving, what you expect to do with those funds, and then how many years any new projects will take to complete, and how you'll be thinking about measuring success.
Sure, I will take that one as well. Thank you for the question. So there's two parts to that federal infrastructure bill. One part addresses the continuation of the FAST Act, and that part assures us that we'll be receiving approximately $25 million more per year than we previously were. We were previously receiving somewhere around $41 million. So that increased funding will go towards the primary purpose, which is preventive maintenance on our buses and trains, and that will help us to supplant other funding, for example, the payroll tax that helps us continue to operate until we get that federal money, and then those funds can be redistributed through our capital project or for more infrastructure improvements. Then the other part of the Infrastructure Act speaks to increases in the competitive grant programs that are run through FTA. And we expect to apply for as many grants as we can identify, but at this moment, we're unable to give you an exact number of how much that money could be. But on the short list of how we'll spend that money is the ongoing effort towards moving our bus fleet to non-emissions or zero emissions, and the fleet replacement of 700 plus buses, plus infrastructure to support it's a long-term, very expensive proposition, but we also expect to seek funding for our Columbia bus base, as well as long-term state of good repair infrastructure projects, including the replacement of at least 4 tranches of light rail vehicles over time.
Thank you.
So shift gears over to capital projects and maintenance, and mentioned in your opening comments, Mr. Dessou, about the Red Line to Better Red project. Could you expand more on what that project entails, and in particular, aside from the extension on the west side, how the project will improve and affect the system as a whole?
I appreciate the question. This is a key piece of TriMet, so I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Steve Witter.
Thank you, General Manager Dessou. Good morning, Matt. Thank you for your question. The Red Line was first conceived in the mid-'80s, so even before TriMet opened its first line, there were folks talking about extending light rail into the airport. In 1997, Bechtel, a developer, came to TriMet and said, we'd like to build you a light rail line in exchange for property rights to develop in the Port of Portland area. And so that was the first true public-private partnership that TriMet has entered into. Since then, the line's been very popular, but as a public-private partnership, and as Bechtel is in the business of making money, value engineering ran rampant throughout the project. And so sections of double track that were originally planned were brought to single track. The airport station that you've known and loved was actually a temporary station intended to be redone along with the airport as it goes through its expansion, which you're actually seeing today. So it was built on the cheap. And so now here we are, and we're restoring some of those features that were taken out of the original proposal. Our chief senior systems engineer, John Griffiths, who has been with TriMet forever and is our rail planner, has a list of bottlenecks. And the Gateway Airport single track section is number 2 on that list, with the steel bridge being number 1, and you're familiar that we made significant improvements at the steel bridge in 2020. So the benefits, besides just extending 10 stations of service out to Hillsborough, the single track sections affect the whole network. And the minute you have a train coming late out of PDX, it will ripple through the entire network for the entire day. And what happens is, as that ripple effect goes through the network, it exacerbates itself, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And by 5 o'clock, you've got trains stacked up. Your ability to sort of, meter out passengers per train is eroded. And so with this reliability improvement on the east side, the single track sections, and fixing the interlocker at Gateway, we're able to improve overall system reliability. We're able to do it through a grant with the federal government by also extending that service out 10 stations to Hillsborough, which increased our ridership. And so suddenly we, and Alan Leto, the architect of this whole scheme, is here in the audience. And Alan and I went up to Seattle with this harebrained idea that we could pull this off, and here we are, we're building this project. What are the other benefits? I mentioned the system reliability throughout the system. We're going to get, through this grant-funded project, some additional light rail vehicles to replace our Type 1 aging vehicles. We have a brand new operator brake facility out in the Hillsborough area, so new facilities for our operators, and some non-revenue pieces of track in the Gateway area, which will allow our maintenance and operations folks to move trains around in case of emergencies, disruptions, and all the work they have to do in the middle of the night. So, Matt, that's my response. I'd be happy to take any follow-ups.
Yeah, and apologies if I'm not as familiar with the specifics of the Gateway piece. It seems like, in your description, Executive Director Witter, really great to see bottlenecks being removed systemically, and working through a list of priorities that will make the system work better overall. Specifically at Gateway, I wonder if you could shed a little light on. Isn't part of that change also going to move? I mean, the double track part makes complete sense, but isn't part of it also to move the bus service like a little bit farther away? And I wondered if you could just talk about kind of the future thinking, and it's a similar dynamic at Hollywood as well, right? That under the new model, the light rail and bus will be like a little bit farther apart. And I just wondered, what TriMet's thinking is about, like a slightly longer commute between rail and bus passengers, and how you're thinking about that moving forward.
Sure. James, it's always a balance between providing the sort of seamless movement of passengers between trains and transfers, and also making sure the system moves smoothly itself. And so you're exactly right. We have separated part of the station platforms at Gateway. And so I didn't bring my drawings and my crutches that I use. But essentially, the majority of our passengers traveling from the airport are headed to destinations to the west, downtown and west side. And I say the majority, that's not everyone. That's not everyone. But so what happens is that train that comes from the airport will come to Gateway, to that separated station. Here's the Gateway today, and here's that separated station. And it's going to go right downtown Portland. So the majority of those users making that move are not going to be forced to transfer. There will be users that are headed east into Gresham, and they will need to walk. And you're probably leaping to, well, what about someone with a mobility challenge or other things? We have kind of a similar situation at the Rose Quarter when folks want to make a seamless transfer to the Yellow Line. And so what folks do is they actually stay on for another station trip. So in order to get those blue lines and green lines, folks transfer at 82nd rather than at Gateway. So it's a little bit of an inconvenience. Other folks will take that, block-long trip and walk to those trains and buses at the Gateway Transit Center. So it is an inconvenience that we're forced to sort of mitigate against the larger system improvement.
I'm gonna pass.
Okay.
On the follow-up.
Yeah, so you also mentioned introductory remarks about the Division Route FX project. And given, I guess, the context of challenges to current ridership and what you see continuing and when that's going to be implemented, how are you thinking of measuring the success of and the value of that new route and bus line?
We're going to pivot back to you again, Steve.
Okay, General Manager. Happy to do it. This is actually a really simple answer to that question. We, in every one of our grant-funded projects, we do a before and after study after 2 years of service. And so we will look, we take data as we enter into this project development process with the federal government. We project what our ridership will be, and then 2 years later, we measure that against the real-time results.
Good. Is that information, does that all become public?
Everything at TriMet's public.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a report that's submitted to, I shouldn't be so quick. It's a report that's submitted to the federal government. It's available through their database that they make available to all transit agencies. So you can sort of look at the performance of different projects, and someone in another part of the country might decide to do a project. Are the ridership projections and the ridership results always match? Hardly never.
Right.
So.
And what happens with the feds when they don't?
We have never been in a situation where that has arisen. So, and I hope we never do.
I have a follow-up on this study. In describing the Red Line project, that's pretty much ridership. I mean, how riders feel about whether it's more efficient for them, whether the separation is a problem. The Division project, to me, is not just about ridership. It's also about how it is affecting the community that line passes through and the pedestrian, vehicular, other modes of transportation. How does this study reflect those interests?
So, Interesting question, Margot. I mean, no, it's good because we always, I mean, I remember the folks that have passed through this chair before me, and we developed these projects to be more than just a ribbon of steel rails or a series of bus stops. They have to be a twofer or a threefer and do more for the community. The FX line, that is one of our most congested lines, I don't mean in terms of traffic, but in terms of pass-ups. And a pass-up is when a full bus goes by you and you get passed up. And so the capacity of the new buses are 50% more than what you see out there today. Our fare system, the way we're handling bicycles on buses and other things, all boarding doors, is intended to address not just the capacity issues that occur in that corridor, but also the speed and reliability. It is a congested corridor, and so is every other corridor in the city right now. Division is unique, is for folks that live there, they've seen it really intensify and densify, and what was one-story parking, general commercial is now 5-story, 0 lot lines. And just improved transit along with those land use changes is something that the federal government looks at. They will look at ridership, they will look at reliability, they'll look at on-time performance. So those are other livability issues that transit, that these projects seek to improve in the transit.
Thanks.
Yep.
I live on Division, and I'm very excited to see the
awesome
upgrades.
We open September 18th, so we'll look for you there.
So at the last few hearings, we've been excited to hear about the incoming electric bus fleet, and we saw in the budget message and in your opening remarks, GM Dessou, that we're expecting a fleet of 24 electric buses set to arrive in fiscal year 2024. We're wondering if you're seeing supply chain issues on sourcing the electric buses, and if what TriMet's response would be if there were, delays or other things that were affected by global concerns.
I'll start off and then I'll pitch to you, Roland, here in just a moment. We are very excited to bring forward to the board today the resolution for 24 new battery electric buses for approval. I think we're kind of in the front of all transit agencies when it comes to looking at battery electric technology. Mr. Hoskins over here, he can talk a little bit about the supply chain and kind of what you're faced with.
Thank you, everybody. And James, I believe you asked the question, yes? First off, I want to acknowledge Mr. Young Park over here. And he's our engineer who is doing managing this transition to zero emissions fleet. And what I have him do is I say, Young, we're going to buy a bus, we're going to get a bus, and I want you to go out and break it. Seriously, I want them to run it as hard as it possibly can so that we can have a reliable vehicle that we can put into service at some point. And with that, we've really worked hard with all of our vendors, New Flyer, Gillig, Complete Coachworks, just all the people that we work with. We partner with their engineers. We do a lot of work behind the scenes with them to help them build a more reliable vehicle. And so with that, I think that's helped us move the needle in the industry quite a bit further. The other thing that I think people don't really understand is in the United States, there's only about 4,000 buses sold annually. So it's not like a big market. So I think when people think about electrification and buses and everything else and the reliability, they think, oh, there's this great big market. It's really not. It's a pretty small niche. So with that in mind, when you look at what the space of the electric vehicles are, it's a very small part of that niche market. And therefore, it makes the need for all of us to be synced together between the vendors and the users, us, and all the players, so that we're working really closely together, because there's charging infrastructure, there's buses, there's everything. So with all that said, because of those relationships, we're going to be on time, I believe, for our electric bus purchase after the board approves it, and then we move forward and work through any delay that might come. We can't predict every supply chain issue. We have experienced several of them, and that we've been able to overcome many of them, but I feel like we're going to be okay. The other piece is with this move to electrification, what you've heard, a lot of people have heard me say, is time's kind of on our side, because it takes time to build the technology and to make it reliable and to work through the issues that come. And we've been really patient and working hard to manage that process and flow. And I think Young has been tremendous in this effort. And so with that, I'm less concerned about if I have a little delay. A large delay, that's a problem. Or if there's something that we can't get, that's a major problem. But I feel like we're staying ahead of the curve, and we're doing a pretty darn good job of managing the process thus far. And so I don't expect any real delays on that. You know, we're moving this agency to reduce our carbon load. I actually wanted JC to speak a little bit to that because we're pretty proud of that. We're probably leading the United States of any transit agency on that. So with that, I'll shift it to him a little bit.
One of the things that we are incredibly proud of that we are trying, as Sam talked about a little bit earlier, is getting our story out there. And we are, as best we can always do more and improve it. But it's TriMet's action that it took last year in reducing our own carbon footprint by over 60% by changing to renewable electricity for our MAX vehicles and all of our TriMet-owned facilities, and moving to R99 diesel, which is renewable diesel, which is 1% fossil fuels, the rest is renewable, And that has lowered our carbon footprint. And it's huge for our transit agency. We already knew that sharing a ride on a bus was, the Earth Day type of thing to do. But even more so now that we have taken those steps. And we have a lot more climate actions still to take, but I think that we are absolutely leading that effort in our region and our community. And it's a great story for TriMet to tell.
I'm absolutely delighted to hear that we are at the front of this movement. When we put together the question about supply chain, we were thinking more about the issues that everyone is facing just in the general manufacturing climate. So the question now is, other transit agencies will be moving in this direction also. Do you think that that will help your sourcing, or will the competition make the supply a bigger issue?
That's a great question, Margot. I believe that it's going to do both. It's going to help and hinder. The reason for that is that to get in the queue, you have to be have planned pretty far ahead.
Yeah.
Fortunately for us, we've done that. The other thing is that we have really good vendor relationships. So when we work with a Gillig or a New Flyer and we want to get in the queue, they know that we're going to be a reliable customer. They know we're going to be a great partner with them, and they're able to kind of push us in. So with that, we're fortunate at just being TriMet. I mean, literally, that's not me. That's everybody at this table. That's our predecessors that have built that brand and that reputation. And so, so I think that helps us to some degree, but at some point, there are going to be some issues, whether it's a precious metal. A lot of those batteries are lithium-ion batteries. You know that there's a lot of nickel, lithium, and other metals in those. You just never know which little piece is going to be the problem. We have the Ukraine issue right now. That's going to play into this as well. So I think it's just a matter of us working really closely with our vendors and just staying abreast of the issues that they're facing. There's always something that's coming up, and it's just trying to stay ahead of it and work with them.
Thanks.
Commissioner, I just wanted to add that our board had the foresight to look at a 2040 plan to transition our fleet over to zero emissions. And that really helped TriMet put us on the map to kind of get out front. And as Roland stated, with our relationships with the manufacturers and the OEMs, it's critical to continue that. Just talked with the president of Gillig yesterday to let him know that we are going to be bringing our 24 battery electric buses to the board for approval and they were extremely excited. But the issue is, as more organizations move towards zero emissions, it puts us in the queue with everyone else there, and it's about a 24-month process from beginning to ending, receiving a bus.
Thanks.
That concludes our questions. I will now call any members of the public to speak. Allegra, do we have anybody signed up?
Yes, so we've received written comment, and we have one person signed up to testify today. We received written comment from Judge Allen regarding the Better Red projects. This testimony was also submitted to the TriMet Board of Directors on April 13th, so we will make it part of our hearing record and post it on our website. And then we have John Charles signed up to testify this morning on the budget.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is John Charles. I'm president of Cascade Policy Institute, a nonprofit policy research organization based in Portland. And I followed TriMet affairs closely for about 30 years, testified many times, and for about 10 years I was a everyday light rail rider from Gresham to Portland. So I'm very familiar with the services. And I want to make two brief points today. And in preparing for this, I was refreshing my memory of the jurisdiction of the TSCC, and I know that from the Oregon Budget Law Manual, TSCC's responsibility is to, quote, encourage the economical and efficient use of public funds and judge whether budget estimates are reasonable. And from your own transmittal letter in last year's report, you noted that the Commission is dedicated to helping all TSCC members continuously improve their budget process and make the resulting budgets more meaningful and valuable. So my goal today is to persuade you that several categories of TriMet expenditures are not economical, efficient, or reasonable, and that by continuing to engage in these practices, the agency makes the resulting budgets less meaningful and less valuable to the public. And since the TSCC must certify whether or not it has any objections or recommendations with respect to the budget before the local governing bodies can formally adopt these budgets, I hope you will in fact make objections or recommendations to the TriMet board. Now my first point is TriMet's claims and expenditures related to, quote, renewable electricity purchasing. That switch was made on 6/1/21. TriMet claimed that this, quote, immediately reduces our carbon emissions by more than 25%. But in order to do so, TriMet announced it would have to pay a 4% premium in electricity costs, which by itself doesn't tell me a whole lot, but after a public records request was fulfilled, I found out that turned out to be a contract that was signed in May of 2021 with PGE that would result in TriMet paying an extra $173,539 per year to purchase renewable energy certificates. But that doesn't get TriMet a different type of electricity. It just allows them to buy renewable energy certificates, or RECs, from PGE, which is strictly a public relations gimmick. Now, according to the two-page contract, which I have extra copies of here if you would like them, according to the contract, it says, quote, the product is a renewable energy certificate and does not contain electricity. That's right, a REC is not a unit of electricity. A REC represents the environmental benefits of 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy that can be paired with electricity. Now, there's a number of problems. I mean, what you're buying is the alleged environmental benefits associated with electricity from certain politically correct sources, typically big utility scale wind farms or solar farms somewhere in the country. But there aren't any environmental benefits. Maybe you heard earlier this month, one of the largest utilities in the country, NextEra Energy, was fined $8 million after at least 150 eagles were killed at its wind farms in 8 states. Okay, windmill operators get to do what most Americans can, kill lots of endangered birds. Plus, windmills fail to produce electricity most of the time. About 70% of the time, they're not doing anything. Requiring spinning reserve, which is usually a fast response fossil resource like natural gas, because the grid itself always has to have supply and demand in sync. So having to maintain spinning reserve, a gas turbine, all the time makes air quality worse, not better. There's no benefit to riders. The light rail trains will operate exactly the same whether or not you've paid $173,000 to buy RECs. Trying to claim that RECs immediately reduces carbon emissions. No, it doesn't. You're using the exact same electricity you were using the day before, and PGE is predominantly, or a major portion of the power they produce or buy comes from natural gas and coal.
Mr. Charles, thank you. I want to make sure we're operating here on a fixed time frame, and we should have said at the beginning that we usually allocate 3 minutes for public comment. So we've heard your first point. Could you summarize the second point and then close for us?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sure. I just say, if you decide to pursue the issue of RECs, many other jurisdictions that you oversee, they're also buying RECs. It's actually a big ticket item. Second is Farebox recovery ratios. Page 13, TriMet budget, objective number 35, quote, maintain acceptable, that's the word, acceptable Farebox recovery to optimize the balance of service demand, revenue, and cost. So what does that mean? The West Commuter Rail has a Farebox recovery ratio of 0.7%, subsidy of $92 per boarding. Apparently that's acceptable because they're still doing it. My question, which I asked TriMet a month ago at their budget hearing, is how much lower does it have to go to be not acceptable? If it was zero, if there were no customers, would you euthanize the train? What's the benefit of that? So I just say, I request that the TSCC flag this issue of Farebox recovery, ask what it means to be an acceptable Farebox ratio. You've already noted that TriMet is about 92% funded by payroll taxes, the all funds budget. Riders hardly pay anything anymore. Is that sustainable going forward? So I think on these two issues, whether RECs represent a prudent expenditure of public funds and whether a 0.7% Farebox ratio represents a prudent expenditure of public funds, I think these are issues that you could really help the public by making a recommendation or raising an objection. And I hope you will do that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for engaging in this thoughtful discussion this morning. TriMet is always our favorite to start with. You are all so knowledgeable and engaged. It feels like more of a conversation than necessarily a question, answer. With that, I will gavel the hearing closed and open a regular meeting of the TSCC. Commissioners, do you have any additional comments on the budget?
I don't.
Thank you. Allegra, will you share your staff recommendation for the certification letter?
Yes, Chair, as mentioned in this hearing, staff found the budget to be well put together and very informative. We especially appreciated the charts and graphs and other visual images that go beyond presenting the number and truly tell the story of the TriMet budget. Staff have no recommendations or objections to the fiscal year 22-23 approved budget.
Thank you, Allegra. May I have a motion authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended by staff?
I'll move. James?
I'll second, Margot.
Thank you, Margot. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Thank you. With that, the TriMet budget is certified by the TSCC for this fiscal year. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll adjourn our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.